Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing almost everyone you know has lost touch with reality. They're still walking, talking, posting, working, but the logic is gone. They say things that contradict themselves in the same sentence. They repeat slogans they can't explain. They react with outrage to questions that are perfectly reasonable. And here's the chilling twist. They don't think they're the ones who've lost it. They think you have. Psychologists have a name for this: mass psychosis, when large groups of people get trapped inside the same false reality. It's not just a bad idea spreading. It's a hypnotic state where facts don't matter, contradictions don't register, and reason is replaced by emotion. And right now, whether you see it or not, you are living in the middle of one. Today, we're going to break it down: how entire societies can fall under a collective spell, the exact steps that make it happen, and the one shift that lets you step outside of it without losing your mind in the process. Stay until the end, because the final key isn't just protection, it's liberation. Here's the thing about mass psychosis: it doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a mood, a heavy air you can't quite name. You notice rules changing without explanation. Conversations feel rehearsed. The same phrases echo across headlines, social media, and everyday talk, like everyone downloaded the same script overnight. At first, you tell yourself it's just a phase. People are stressed. Things will level out. But they don't. The script gets tighter. The range of acceptable thought gets narrower, and the penalty for stepping outside of it gets harsher. Until one day, you realize something terrifying. Most people aren't thinking at all. They're following, blindly. Mass psychosis isn't new. It's older than kingdoms, older than printing presses, older than the countries we live in. It's toppled empires, burned cities, and rewritten history. And if you don't know how it works, you'll be swept into it without even realizing it's happening. Which is exactly what we're going to expose. Starting with the oldest weapon in the arsenal of mass control, the enemy that every civilization has faced, and almost none have defeated. Mass psychosis isn't some glitch of the modern age. It's an ancient force that has shaped and often destroyed civilizations for thousands of years. If you look back far enough, you'll find entire empires brought to ruin not by invading armies, but by the slow rot of collective delusion. Ancient Rome, once the most advanced and organized society on Earth, didn't fall overnight. It crumbled under its own weight as superstition, spectacle, and distraction replaced reason. The people traded the hard work of civic responsibility for bread and circuses, entertainment to keep them pacified while reality quietly decayed behind the scenes. In the Middle Ages, waves of hysteria swept across Europe. Witch hunts, religious crusades, plagues of fear that infected whole populations. People were burned alive for imaginary crimes. Wars were fought over visions and omens. Facts didn't matter. What mattered was the story everyone agreed to believe, no matter how absurd it became. The French social psychologist Gustave Le Bon studied this over a century ago. He discovered that once individuals merge into a crowd, something strange happens. Personal responsibility dissolves. Independent thought fades. Alone, you might weigh evidence, question assumptions, and adjust your beliefs. But in a group, logic takes a backseat to emotion. The crowd moves as one, quick to anger, quick to fear, quick to obey. It's not careful, it's not patient, it's impulsive, and it's dangerous. Think of it like a tide. Alone, you can stand still. But when the tide of the crowd pulls, you move whether you want to or not. And here's the trick. People caught in it often don't feel coerced. They feel righteous. They feel part of something bigger. But the steering wheel is no longer in their hands. They've handed it over to the collective. We like to think the modern world is immune to this. After all, we have science, we have technology, we have endless access to information. But information alone doesn't grant wisdom. It just gives the crowd more material to shape its preferred narrative. The tools have changed, but the psychology is identical. The same forces that fueled mass delusions in the past are alive and well. Only now they're faster, louder, and global. And when fear enters the picture, this old enemy becomes unstoppable. If mass psychosis is the engine, fear is the fuel that makes it roar. Without fear, the crowd is restless but scattered. Introduce fear, and suddenly it has direction. Fear focuses attention, simplifies choices, and overrides the slow, careful work of reason. It doesn't even have to be fear of something real. In fact, it often works better when the threat is vague, unseen, or impossible to prove. An invisible danger can be everywhere at once, hiding in a neighbor's expression, in a stranger's cough, in the silence between conversations. The less defined the threat, the more room there is for the imagination to run wild, and the more power for anyone claiming to understand it. History is full of examples: the terror of divine punishment, the fear of foreign infiltration, the dread of economic collapse, the panic over unseen health risks. Whether based on truth or inflated beyond recognition, each has been used to rally populations into obedience. The human nervous system evolved for instant reaction to danger. When our ancestors saw movement in the tall grass, they didn't stop to debate it. They prepared to run. That reflex kept us alive in the wild. But in the age of instant information, it makes us vulnerable. A breaking news alert can trigger the same adrenaline rush as spotting a predator, even if there's no immediate danger to us at all. And once fear takes hold, the mind becomes easier to guide. A fearful brain doesn't want complexity, it wants relief. The quickest relief comes from a simple story with a clear villain and a trusted authority who promises safety. That's why fear is so effective at creating conformity. It narrows our vision until only one path seems safe to take. The most dangerous part is that people in this state rarely think they're being manipulated. On the contrary, they see themselves as vigilant and informed, even heroic. And anyone who questions their chosen narrative isn't just wrong. They're reckless, dangerous, even evil. This is how fear turns disagreement into moral outrage, and how moral outrage justifies silencing dissent. In our world, fear can be manufactured and delivered on demand. It can be packaged into 30-second clips, repeated endlessly, and piped directly into your hand before you've had your morning coffee. It becomes the background noise of life, a constant reminder that you're not safe, that you must stay with the group, that survival depends on obedience. And once fear has primed the crowd, the next step in mass psychosis becomes inevitable. To understand why mass psychosis works so well, you have to understand something buried deep in your own wiring. Long before skyscrapers, smartphones, or even written language, we lived in tribes. Belonging wasn't optional. It was survival. Being accepted meant food, shelter, and protection. Being cast out meant facing predators, starvation, and almost certain death. That truth is etched into us. Rejection doesn't just hurt emotionally. The brain processes it like physical pain. Our ancestors who valued belonging over personal judgment were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. The ones who defied the group too often didn't. Fast forward to today. Lions no longer stalk us in the grass, but that ancient program is still running in the background. Social exile no longer kills the body, but it terrifies the mind. We are wired to avoid it, even if that means silencing the part of us that sees things differently. Psychologist Solomon Asch proved just how powerful this instinct is. In the 1950s, he ran a simple experiment. Volunteers were shown a set of lines and asked a straightforward question: which two lines match in length? The answer was obvious, until the other people in the room, who were secretly actors, all gave the same wrong answer. Faced with unanimous but false agreement, most participants went along with the group. They saw the truth and ignored it. Not because they were weak or unintelligent, but because the need to belong is older and stronger than the need to be right. This is exactly what mass psychosis exploits. When fear rises, the urge to seek safety in the group overwhelms the quiet voice of reason. That voice says, something is off. The group says, you're imagining things. And the fear of being the only one who sees the problem is enough to make you stop seeing it at all. In our hyper-connected world, this effect is amplified. Your tribe isn't just the people you know. It's millions of strangers who can instantly approve, condemn, or shame you. The fear of exile from this global crowd can be sharper than any physical threat our ancestors faced. And once this ancient program takes over, it's only a matter of time before the crowd moves as one. The question is, where is it heading? The answer lies in the next stage of the process, a sequence so predictable that history has recorded it again and again. Mass psychosis doesn't appear overnight. It unfolds in stages, the same pattern playing out across cultures, centuries, and continents. Once you know the stages, you start to see them everywhere, from ancient history to the latest headlines. Stage 1. Disorientation. It begins when the old order starts to wobble. Economies strain, leaders contradict themselves, trusted institutions falter. The patterns people rely on no longer make sense. It feels like the ground is shifting beneath your feet. The mind, desperate for stability, starts scanning for answers. Stage 2. Simplification. Into that uncertainty, a story emerges. It's easy to follow, emotionally charged and endlessly repeated. It points to a villain, a savior, and a set of rules. Complexity disappears. Nuance is replaced by absolutes, good or evil, right or wrong, us or them. People cling to it because it feels solid, even if it's not true. Stage 3. Conformity. More and more people adopt the new narrative. Some believe it completely, others have doubts, but keep quiet, assuming they're the only ones who disagree. This is pluralistic ignorance, the belief that you're alone in your skepticism, when in reality, many share it but are too afraid to speak. Silence gets mistaken for agreement, and agreement becomes the new reality. Stage 4. Aggression. Once the story is dominant, dissent becomes dangerous. Those who question it are labeled as threats, immoral, reckless, even enemies of the people. The crowd starts policing itself, enforcing the rules socially, politically, sometimes violently. Debate dies. Obedience is rewarded. Independent thought is punished. Stage 5. Awakening. Eventually, cracks appear in the illusion. Contradictions pile up. Reality pushes through. A few people start to question, then more. The collective trance begins to weaken. But this stage is fragile. If the awakening comes too early, those who see through the illusion can be crushed by the still dominant crowd. If it comes too late, the damage is already done. These stages aren't just societal. They happen inside individuals. You may have felt them yourself. The confusion, the relief of a simple answer, the pressure to conform, the hostility toward dissent, and finally, the uneasy clarity when you realize the story was never the whole truth. Recognizing the pattern doesn't make you immune, but it gives you a map. And with a map, you can choose your path. Whether to march with the crowd through every stage, or step off the road before it ends in disaster. Awakening is the moment the spell starts to crack. It rarely happens in a single dramatic burst. More often, it's a series of small, unsettling realizations. Something doesn't add up. A detail that was supposed to be solid suddenly shifts. You notice that certain facts are never mentioned, certain questions never answered. At first you brush it aside. Everyone else seems fine. Maybe you're overthinking, but then it happens again and again. And before long, the cracks spread. You see events firsthand that get reported differently the next day. You hear rules explained one way this week, another way next week, with no acknowledgement that anything has changed. You feel the unspoken pressure, not to understand, but to agree. Awakening isn't a rush of joy. It can feel like grief. You start realizing how much of what you trusted was built on unstable ground. You remember defending positions you now see were flawed, even harmful. And that realization can hurt because it means you were part of sustaining the illusion. The process can be lonely. The more you notice, the harder it becomes to talk about. Conversations turn cautious. Jokes feel risky. Friends you've known for years may suddenly treat you differently. It's not uncommon to lose relationships, opportunities, and the easy comfort of belonging. That's why awakening takes courage. Not the loud, fist-in-the-air kind, but the steady kind that holds you upright when the crowd moves in the opposite direction. History is filled with people who reached this stage long before the majority. Socrates, Galileo, Orwell. They lived in times when questioning the dominant narrative wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. Yet they asked the questions anyway. Many paid a steep price. But they also left behind proof that it is possible to see clearly in a world determined to stay blind. The danger of awakening is that it can trap you in bitterness. If all you do is tear down illusions, you risk living in constant suspicion. True awakening goes further. It moves from disillusionment to discernment. The ability to see manipulation without assuming everyone is an enemy, to think independently without becoming isolated in your own cynicism. When you reach that point, you stop needing the crowd's approval. You stop fearing its disapproval. And you begin to live in a way where illusions have no real hold over you, even if the rest of the world keeps chasing them. Escaping mass psychosis isn't a one-time breakthrough. It's a skill you have to maintain, like keeping your body healthy. The goal isn't to shut the world out, but to filter what comes in and decide for yourself what stays. The first step is awareness. Pay attention to your own thoughts and ask, where did this come from? Was it the result of your own reasoning, or did it slip in through repetition, headlines, or the opinions of people you didn't even consciously choose to trust? Just because a thought feels like yours doesn't mean it started with you. The second step is emotional control. Mass psychosis feeds on reactivity. Outrage and fear are contagious. The faster you react, the easier you are to manipulate. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means creating space between trigger and response. That space is where choice lives. The third step is meaning. Without a strong why, you will be swept into the why of the crowd. Your anchor might be a commitment to truth, a spiritual belief, a creative calling, or the protection of those you love. Whatever it is, it must be deep enough to hold you steady when the cultural tide turns. The fourth step is finding real allies. Not an echo chamber where everyone agrees, but a small group of people who value honesty over comfort. People who will challenge you when you're wrong, spot the blind spots you can't see, and stand beside you when speaking the truth isn't popular. A single mind committed to clarity can make an impact, but a connected network of them can change the direction of a culture. The fifth step is controlling your information diet. The modern world is designed to flood you with noise. If you want clarity, you have to be intentional about what you consume. Seek sources that show how they reach their conclusions, not just what those conclusions are. Engage with opposing viewpoints, not to weaken your beliefs, but to test and strengthen them. Building immunity is about staying in the world without being pulled into the trance of the crowd. It's the ability to walk through a storm without carrying the storm inside you. And when you master it, you don't just protect yourself. You become a stabilizing presence for others. In a culture built on emotional contagion, a calm, clear mind is a rare and powerful force. The deepest root of mass psychosis isn't ignorance, and it's not even fear of the truth. It's fear of being alone with the truth. Most people can handle reality if others are standing there with them. What feels unbearable is seeing it clearly and realizing no one else is willing to admit it. That's why so many will trade truth for the safety of a shared illusion. The applause of the crowd feels like validation, but it's a fragile kind. It disappears the moment you stop repeating the script. The final escape from the collective trance is learning to live without needing the crowd's approval. That doesn't mean rejecting community. It means detaching your identity from its acceptance. You become the kind of person who can stand in a room full of disagreement and stay steady because your compass isn't external, it's internal. When you reach this place, everything changes. You stop performing for applause. You stop defending yourself against every misunderstanding. You stop measuring your worth by how many people agree with you. And the silence of others no longer feels like a threat. This is real freedom. The ability to think your own thoughts, speak your own words, and live by your own understanding, without resentment toward those who can't follow you there. The most resilient individuals in history had this quality. They didn't just resist the herd, they outgrew the need for it. They found their home in the truth itself, even if it meant walking outside the walls of popular opinion. From this place, you don't have to fight mass psychosis head-on. Your existence itself disrupts it. Not because you're attacking it, but because you're proof that another way of living is possible. Those still trapped in the collective trance may feel threatened by you, but some will quietly be drawn to your steadiness, and they'll start remembering that their mind belongs to them. Escaping in this way isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. You'll be tempted to trade clarity for comfort. You'll be invited back into the safety of agreement. And you'll have to choose, again and again, whether that safety is worth the cost. The revolution that matters most isn't overthrowing systems. It's freeing the individual mind. When enough minds are free, the systems will follow. Until then, the most powerful thing you can do is unbecome what the world has tried to make of you. Stand your ground, even if you stand alone. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Walk with clarity, not because it wins applause, but because it's the only way to walk without losing yourself. When you do, you may not change the whole world overnight, but you'll change your own. And that's where every real revolution begins. Sometimes I wonder if I'm broken, or just the only one who's finally honest about how fake it all feels. I used to force myself into conversations that felt like cardboard. Smile on cue, nod at the right places, learn the script, repeat it. I thought I was being social, but I was just being agreeable. Because no one told me that some of us aren't meant to blend in, we're meant to see through. It usually starts quietly, not with a breakdown or some dramatic fall from grace, but with an ache, a kind of internal hum that says, this isn't it. These people, these conversations, this noise, this version of me. And if you don't silence it, if you let that hum grow louder, it eventually becomes unbearable to keep playing the game. You start ghosting events, letting texts rot, watching the phone ring and not caring who it is. People call it burnout, they call it antisocial, they call it depression. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's not collapse? What if it's clarity? You're not pulling away from people because you're broken. You're pulling away because you're starting to see them and yourself with a kind of painful honesty that doesn't let you pretend anymore. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it. He once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." Translation: if you can live comfortably in surface-level distraction, it's probably because you've never really touched the depth of what it means to be human. And once you do touch it, once you realize how much of modern life is built on pretending, posturing, and pleasing, you don't want to be around it. You're not antisocial. You're allergic to performance. For a while, you still try. You smile. You nod. You laugh at the jokes. You go to the dinner. But halfway through a conversation, you catch yourself staring into space, thinking, none of this is real. Not because you don't care, but because the mask you're wearing to survive that room is suffocating. And you realize you'd rather be alone in the truth than surrounded by people in a lie. This is the beginning of unbecoming, not healing, not fixing, but unraveling, letting go of the self you stitched together just to belong somewhere you were never meant to stay. And here's the first brutal truth. Most people don't want a connection. They want relief. Relief from their loneliness. Relief from their silence. Relief from their own mind. So they fill their calendars. They chase validation. They confuse attention with intimacy. And when you stop playing along, they get uncomfortable. Because you become a mirror they didn't ask to look into. You say, "I just need some space." They hear, "You're not enough." But this isn't about them. It's about you. And the sacred pull of your own mind saying, "Come home." Come home to the parts of yourself you abandoned in rooms where depth was unwelcome. Come home to the conversations you've been dying to have but can't force on people who only speak in highlights and hashtags. Come home to the truth that being alone doesn't mean you're lacking. It might mean you're finally full. The unraveling doesn't happen all at once. It's not cinematic, it's not beautiful, it's subtle, gradual, almost boring. At first you say no to one thing, a party, a group hang, a happy hour. You tell yourself it's just for tonight. You're tired, you need to recharge. But then next week comes, and the idea of small talk feels unbearable. The laughter sounds rehearsed. The questions feel like transactions. What do you do? Been busy lately? You start to see the script behind the smiles, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you pull back, not out of malice, not even out of fear, but because your inner world starts asking questions the outer world refuses to answer. Why does no one ever say what they actually mean? Why does silence feel more nourishing than most conversations? Why do I feel lonelier surrounded by people than I do when I'm completely alone? This is the withdrawal, not from life, but from illusion. Schopenhauer believed that social life was often a performance of connection without the substance. He saw it not as evil, but as exhausting. Most people don't seek truth in others. They seek validation. And once you no longer need that validation, something strange happens. You disappear. Not physically, emotionally, energetically. You stop feeding the machine. You stop curating your presence. You stop pretending that what bores you still excites you. This isn't depression. This isn't coldness. This is clarity beginning to take shape. You realize that many relationships were built not on depth or truth, but on convenience, on shared environments, shared schedules, shared coping mechanisms. Take away the proximity, and the bond dissolves. You start to notice who reaches out when you stop initiating. You notice how much of your presence was maintenance, and it stings, because some of the people you loved most didn't love you back. They loved the version of you who showed up and made things easier. The version who nodded along, who laughed at jokes that didn't land, who asked questions no one ever asked you in return. When that version fades, so do they, and you're left in the quiet, where everything hurts, but nothing lies. This is the pattern, the shedding, the solitude that doesn't ask for your permission. It claims you. And somewhere in that space, something ancient stirs, a voice that says, "This is who you were before you learned how to be liked." This is the stage where people misunderstand you most. You cancel plans and they think you're rude. You're quiet at gatherings and they think you're judging. You say no and they think you're arrogant. But you're not any of those things. You're just done pretending. Here's what no one tells you about solitude. At first it feels like emptiness, a blank room, a hollow ache, silence that stretches too long. But stay there long enough, and something begins to whisper. Not your ego, not your inner critic, not even your mind, but something older, something quieter. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in remembering. You start to recall versions of yourself that were buried beneath the noise. The child who could sit in a room for hours and daydream. The teenager who questioned things that made adults uncomfortable. The parts of you that always knew truth was something you felt, not just something you were taught. This is the awakening of the inner world. Not an escape, but a return. You begin to create, not for applause but for expression. You write things and don't post them. You dance alone in your apartment at 1 a.m. You go on walks without headphones just to hear your thoughts without interference. And those thoughts, they change. They soften. They deepen. They begin to speak to you like an old friend, because you're finally listening. Schopenhauer saw this as essential, not optional, for anyone who truly wants to understand the nature of reality, to observe without distortion, to feel without distraction, to think without interference. He believed solitude wasn't isolation, it was integration. The pulling back of all your fragmented selves into something whole. Because when you're always around others, you unconsciously fracture yourself. You adapt, you censor, you perform. But alone, you exist, raw, unfiltered, real. And in that rawness, something powerful begins to take root: sovereignty. You no longer need the world to reflect you back to yourself. You no longer crave the cheap high of likes, mentions, or casual flattery. You begin to enjoy the space between things, between thoughts, between interactions, between breaths. The world becomes less of a stage and more of a canvas. And suddenly, you don't feel empty. You feel full, because now you're not feeding off others. You're feeding from within. You begin to understand why monks go silent, why philosophers write in seclusion, why artists disappear before their best work appears. It's not because they're rejecting life, it's because they're finally meeting it without filters. This is the sacred shift from social survival to spiritual clarity, from distraction to discernment. And when that inner world awakens, you no longer ask, "What should I say to be liked?" You ask, "What is true enough to say, even if no one claps?" This is how you begin to reclaim your life, not in loud declarations, but in quiet decisions. Decisions like, "No, I won't go." "Yes, I'll stay in tonight." "No, I don't need to explain myself." You realize your peace is not up for negotiation. Your presence is not a public utility. Your truth is not a group project. You were never meant to be on all the time. You were meant to be, and now you are. Clarity doesn't come cheap. No one tells you that. You imagine that waking up will feel like light pouring through the cracks, that you'll feel free, relieved, whole. But the truth, it's heavier than that. Awakening begins as a kind of death, the death of illusions, the death of roles you used to play, the death of comfort in places that once felt like home. And when that happens, you grieve. You grieve friendships that can't hold your truth. You grieve the old version of you who tried so hard to fit in. You grieve the realization that love, for many, was conditional on your conformity. Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat this. He believed that to see clearly is to suffer deeply, because the world is not kind to those who stop pretending. Once you stop performing, you lose the applause. Once you stop agreeing, you lose the approval. Once you stop showing up as the version of you others are used to, you lose people. And some of them you'll miss. You'll sit in your room some nights and remember how easy it was to not think so much. How easy it was to just go along with the group. To laugh even when nothing was funny. To say yes when your whole body said no. There's a strange nostalgia for the mask, because it gave you access. Access to rooms you no longer belong in. Access to people you no longer trust. Access to comfort you can no longer fake. And now, you're left with the silence, sometimes sacred, sometimes suffocating. Because being awake in a sleeping world is a kind of exile. You see too much. You feel too deeply. You question things others accept without blinking. You become difficult, too intense, too sensitive, too serious. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you're inconvenient. Because you can't unsee what you've seen. And you won't play along just to be liked. And that's terrifying to people who need your compliance to feel comfortable. So they ghost, or criticize, or say you've changed. And they're right. You You've started listening to your gut instead of groupthink. You've started asking better questions. You've started saying no without guilt. And yes, it costs you. It costs you connection. It costs you certainty. It costs you the belonging you never really had, but still clung to like a child gripping a broken toy. But here's the twist. Everything you lose, you gain in a different form. You lose shallow approval, but gain self-respect. You lose performance-based friendships, but gain inner quiet. You lose comfort, but gain truth. And truth, unlike comfort, doesn't fluctuate. It anchors you, even when you're crying, even when you're misunderstood, even when you're lonely. Schopenhauer called this loneliness inevitable for those who pursue wisdom, because the deeper your understanding, the fewer people you can speak to without translating yourself. But he didn't view it as tragedy. He saw it as necessity, because to know yourself is to stop fearing solitude, to require it. And slowly that solitude becomes sacred, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Not everyone stays in solitude forever, but those who return, they come back different, not louder, not shinier, not more palatable to the crowd. They return like a storm that has learned to whisper. Before, you needed company to feel real. Now you walk into a room and say nothing and still carry presence, because silence isn't your absence anymore, it's your essence. This is the paradox Schopenhauer hinted at but never spelled out. That true power doesn't look like dominance. It looks like sovereignty, the kind of energy that doesn't beg to be seen, because it sees itself. You've returned to the world, but not to belong to it, to influence it, not to win its approval, to embody your truth in full, and that's unsettling. People notice something different. They can't explain it, but they feel it. You no longer laugh to fill silence. You no longer smile to be accepted. You no longer explain yourself to be understood. There is a calmness in you now that cannot be shaken, because it was earned, in fire, in quiet, in exile. You realize you don't need to raise your voice. You are the voice, not because you're better, but because you're finally aligned with your values, with your boundaries, with your soul. This kind of alignment is magnetic, not because it draws everyone in, but because it repels the unnecessary. And what remains is real and rare. You're no longer addicted to relevance. You're devoted to resonance. So you speak slower now. You choose your words, not to perform, but to pierce. You don't rush to fill space. You honor it. You don't show up everywhere. You show up when it matters. This is what happens when solitude finishes its work. You return as a presence, not a person. As a mirror, not a mask. You enter a room and change its temperature, not by force, but by frequency. You are no longer seeking the world's permission to be. You are, fully, unapologetically, undeniably. This is the return, not to who you were, but to who you've always been, underneath it all. And now, you finally understand. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant, with power, with clarity, with you. So here you are, not at the end of a journey, but at the beginning of a very different one. Not the path of becoming, but the path of unbecoming. All the noise has faded, the applause has stopped, the mirrors have shattered, and in the aftermath, something has emerged. Something unmistakable. You, not the version they shaped, not the mask you wore to survive, not the product of your past, but the presence beneath it all. And now, with nothing left to prove, you finally understand. You never needed to be understood by everyone. You only needed to be known by yourself. That's the final realization. Solitude wasn't isolation. It was recognition of who you are when no one's watching, of what you value when no one's clapping, of what you believe when no one's preaching. All this time you thought you were lonely, but you were being reintroduced to the only relationship that ever truly mattered, the one between you and your soul. And here's the secret. Once you make peace there, within, You become untouchable, not in a hardened way, not in a distant way, but in a grounded, luminous, still way. Because now, your validation doesn't come from being seen, it comes from seeing, clearly, quietly, completely, and the world will still misunderstand you. That doesn't change. But you'll stop needing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding. You'll stop auditioning for connection that requires you to shrink. You'll stop trying to fit into spaces that demand your noise and reject your depth, because now you know presence is power, solitude is strength, and clarity is freedom. So when they ask, why don't you come around anymore? You won't need to defend yourself, you'll just smile, not out of arrogance, but out of peace, because you know what they don't, that your absence isn't emptiness, it's elevation. And from up here, you finally see it all clearly. You're not antisocial, you're not broken, you're not hiding, you're awake. And this life you're building in the silence, it may not be loud, it may not be seen, it may never trend, but it is yours. And that is everything. All right, let's cut the fluff. There's always been something deeply fascinating, and just a little unsettling, about the lone wolves of society. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Those individuals who wander through life on the outskirts, stepping to their own beat, completely detached from the rhythm of everyone else. They seem to glide effortlessly between moments of brilliance and borderline insanity. But what's actually going on behind their eyes? Is it genius, madness, or some twisted cocktail of both? Let's not pretend this is just some harmless curiosity. No, it's personal. If you're here, you've felt the pull of isolation, the intoxicating solitude that both terrifies and comforts you. Maybe you've been called eccentric, weird, or my personal favorite, intense. That's society's polite way of saying, we don't know what the hell to do with you. Well, welcome home. First things first, forget the romanticized bullshit about lone wolves. This isn't some Hollywood movie where a misunderstood hero rides off into the sunset. No, real lone wolves often ride straight into darkness, accompanied only by their overactive minds and a healthy dose of existential dread. Think of Friedrich Nietzsche wandering the streets of Turin, arguing with horses, or Vincent van Gogh painting starry nights while spiraling deeper into his personal abyss. These weren't happy endings, folks, but they were brutally honest explorations of what happens when you stray too far from the herd. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Lone wolves aren't necessarily born different. They're made. Usually shaped by disappointment, betrayal, or a deep primal instinct that something in society is fundamentally off. If you're nodding right now, congrats. You're probably more wolf than sheep. This video isn't here to stroke your ego, though. I'm not here to tell you you're special or destined for greatness. I'm here to confront you with the raw, complicated reality of your own psyche. Because isolation, while it might breed creativity, also breeds monsters. Loneliness can sharpen your insights, but it can also distort them beyond recognition. So let's journey deep into the labyrinth of your mind. We'll explore the crossroads where genius meets madness. We'll confront the darkness that comes with self-awareness. And maybe, just maybe, we'll come out the other side understanding ourselves a little better, or perhaps questioning even more. Because here's a secret. Sanity is overrated. It's safe, sure, comfortable even, but the price of admission is conformity, stagnation, and boredom. And if you're a lone wolf, boredom is worse than death. Let's get started. Let's rewind the tape. Lone wolves aren't plucked from thin air. They're carefully sculpted by circumstances that push them outside the pack. Think back to your own childhood. Maybe you were the kid who sat alone, not because you couldn't make friends, but because you didn't resonate with superficial chatter about the latest cartoons or playground gossip. You were busy thinking about things far beyond your years. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The lone wolf's journey often begins with this deep-seated sense of not belonging. Early experiences of rejection, bullying, or just plain misunderstanding become foundational, embedding a profound mistrust of others deep within your psyche. Soon enough, you figure out it's easier, safer, and frankly more peaceful to walk alone. And let's be brutally honest here. Early isolation isn't just a quiet sadness, it's formative trauma. It shapes the way you interact with the world. You develop razor-sharp intuition, a heightened sensitivity to social cues, and a fiercely independent streak. You become adept at reading people because you had to learn quickly who was safe and who wasn't. But this kind of forced maturity comes at a cost. It steals away your innocence and replaces it with a relentless internal dialogue. You begin to question everything: people's intentions, societal norms, even your own sanity. Trust, forget about it. Vulnerability, not in this lifetime. The consequence? You evolve into someone who values authenticity above all else, even if it means alienation. You'd rather be honest and alone than surrounded by superficial smiles and empty conversations. Yet this honesty is exactly what makes you magnetic to certain people. Those who secretly crave depth but are too afraid to seek it themselves. Here's the kicker. The very traits that push you away from others are often your greatest strengths. Your intense introspection leads to unique insights, unconventional ideas, and original thinking. It's no coincidence that many lone wolves become influential artists, writers, philosophers, and innovators. Solitude is their crucible, transforming pain and isolation into something valuable. But remember, genius and madness share a blurred boundary. Just as solitude fosters creativity, prolonged isolation can erode your grip on reality. It's a delicate dance, a precarious balance, and not everyone makes it out intact. So, the question remains: how far can you wander before you get lost? Let's keep going. Let's talk about the elephant in the room: loneliness. The lone wolf's existence is a paradox. Fiercely independent yet profoundly lonely. You love your freedom, but you also ache for meaningful connection. Here's the brutal reality. You can't have total freedom and deep intimacy at the same time. Not fully, not without compromise. Every lone wolf secretly dreams of finding another like-minded soul, someone who understands the chaos in their mind, someone who sees them without judgment. But here's the cruel twist. Lone wolves struggle to trust even when they find this person. Independence has become both your greatest asset and your biggest obstacle. You crave connection, yet fear dependency. You're terrified of losing your autonomy, of diluting your intensity just to fit into someone else's world. Here's the raw truth. Independence becomes an addiction. It's intoxicating. This feeling of being accountable to no one, of living by your own code, free from the judgments or expectations of others. But independence, when pursued relentlessly, evolves into isolation, and isolation eventually morphs into something much darker: emotional starvation. You see, independence isn't just freedom, it's armor. It shields you from pain, betrayal, and disappointment. Yet in its fierce protection, it denies you the basic human needs of vulnerability and connection. Sooner or later, your fortress of solitude turns into a prison, and what began as empowering self-sufficiency starts to suffocate you. Why does this happen? Because human beings are fundamentally social creatures, wired for connection. Even you, lone wolf, are not exempt from biology. No matter how strongly your mind resists, your heart secretly longs for acceptance, understanding, and emotional intimacy. But to admit this desire feels like weakness, like surrendering your precious autonomy. And here's where the dilemma crystallizes. Vulnerability terrifies you, because it feels like handing someone else power over your emotional state. Your greatest fear isn't necessarily rejection, it's losing yourself to another person. You dread becoming emotionally dependent, as if dependency would erase the fiercely unique individual you've fought so hard to become. So you hold back, even when meaningful connection presents itself. You observe from a distance, analyzing, overthinking, trapped by your own hyper-awareness. People often mistake this for coldness or arrogance. They don't realize your distance is actually cautious curiosity, rooted in a fear of losing yourself. But here's a disturbing reality check. Total independence is an illusion. No one can live completely detached without eventually feeling hollow, numb, and disconnected. Not just from others, but from themselves. Your pursuit of absolute freedom paradoxically chains you to loneliness. Your isolation becomes a silent, invisible enemy, slowly eroding your sense of self-worth. Eventually, even your creative insights, the very thing you treasure, begin to suffer. Isolation, once the fuel for your ideas, now drains your inspiration. Your inner dialogue, always intense, becomes harsher and more critical. The clarity you once enjoyed starts twisting into confusion, doubt, and nihilistic despair. Yet, despite this suffering, admitting you need others feels unbearably shameful. The lone wolf's pride is both your greatest ally and most stubborn foe. Pride whispers, "I don't need anyone," even as your heart quietly asks, "But what if I do?" There's a cost to independence that no one talks about, a silent price paid in loneliness, misunderstood interactions, and missed opportunities for deep, meaningful relationships. And here's perhaps the cruelest twist of all. The more you understand yourself, the harder connecting with others becomes. You're trapped in a self-constructed paradox where your heightened self-awareness isolates you further from those who can't or won't see beneath the surface. But let's not wallow. This is not a pity party. It's an acknowledgement of reality. The cost of independence is high, but recognizing that cost is the first step toward reclaiming your emotional equilibrium. So ask yourself, lone wolf, how much isolation can you truly endure before independence becomes a prison sentence? And more importantly, how do you balance the freedom you cherish with the connection your soul craves? If this is hitting somewhere deep, I want to hear from you. Not for engagement, for realness. Tell me, has solitude shaped you? Has independence protected you, or cost you something you can't name? Drop it in the comments. Speak like no one's watching. I read them all. And if someone else's comment feels like your own mind, let them know. Lone wolves don't always howl, but sometimes they recognize each other in silence. Let's continue deeper. This is where the story turns inward and gets uncomfortable. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Not many people are willing to peel back the layers. Most turn away the moment the mask begins to slip. But you're still here. That tells me you're ready to face what lies beneath your carefully constructed identity, ready to stare into the mirror without flinching. Let's start with the truth. Everyone has a shadow. Carl Jung wasn't being poetic when he coined the term. He was naming a psychological reality, the darker half of your psyche that you'd rather keep hidden. Your envy, your rage, your need for control, your shame, your lust, your fear of failure, they all live in the shadow, and for lone wolves, that shadow often grows unchecked. Why? Because isolation gives it room to fester. There's no one around to reflect your blind spots back to you, no relationships to temper your extremes, so the shadow grows powerful, seductive. It whispers lies that feel like truth. You're better than them. You don't need anyone. They'll just betray you. Over time, these whispers become internal commandments, shaping your behavior, your worldview, your identity. You start seeing the world not as it is, but through the distorted lens of your shadow. And the worst part? You think you're being objective. But let me be clear. Facing the shadow is not about self-hate or moral judgment. It's about radical honesty. It's about reclaiming parts of yourself you've buried, denied, or rejected. Because the longer you ignore your shadow, the more control it has over you. And eventually, it starts making decisions for you, from the shadows. It sabotages potential relationships, it fuels your cynicism, it whispers the kind of poisonous thoughts that keep you paralyzed. Why try? You'll just fail. They don't actually like you. You're not good enough. And because these thoughts sound like your own voice, you believe them. The path to integration begins when you stop resisting these parts of yourself. You don't have to act on them. You don't have to indulge them. But you do have to acknowledge them, own them, dialogue with them. Because once you do, something strange happens. They lose their grip. They stop being monsters in the basement and start becoming tools in your arsenal. That rage, it can become courage. That envy, it can point you toward your deepest desires. That fear, it can sharpen your focus. When you own your shadow, you stop being ruled by it, and you start becoming whole. But this isn't a one-time battle. It's a lifelong confrontation. The shadow doesn't disappear. It evolves. It hides in new places. It wears different masks. But every time you face it, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was lost to shame, repression, or fear. And here's the hard truth that no one tells you. The deeper your self-awareness, the darker the shadow you have to confront. That's the price of inner depth. It's not all insight and enlightenment. It's also reckoning, chaos, and breakdowns. But those breakdowns, they often precede breakthroughs. So if you're standing at the edge of your inner abyss, staring down the worst parts of yourself, good. That means you're getting close. Not to perfection, but to authenticity. Because the real lone wolf isn't the one who hides in the forest avoiding everyone. It's the one who enters the forest of their own mind and confronts the monsters within. Now we get to the part everyone romanticizes. The lone wolf's creative power, the genius, the vision, the raw originality that seems to pour out from the margins of society, from minds too strange, too intense, too untamable for the mainstream. And let's be honest, there's truth to it. Isolation gives birth to insight. Solitude sharpens perception. When you're removed from the herd, you stop mimicking the noise of the crowd, and you start hearing your own signal. This is the source of the lone wolf's genius: unfiltered thought, deep reflection, and an uncompromising vision forged in silence. Think of the greatest minds in history: Kafka, Tesla, Emily Dickinson, David Foster Wallace, Nietzsche. Their brilliance wasn't born in boardrooms or brainstorming sessions. It was shaped in isolation, in the crucible of their own internal chaos. That's the gift of solitude. It gives you uninterrupted access to the raw data of your own mind. You notice patterns others overlook. You question what others accept. You imagine what others fear to speak. You're not content with surface-level explanations. You drill deeper into the essence of things. And in doing so, you create ideas, art, philosophy, innovation that doesn't just echo culture, it challenges it. But here's the part they don't tell you in those Instagram quote posts about being a misunderstood genius. That same isolation that breeds originality also breeds distortion. Without external feedback, your thoughts become echo chambers. Without challenge, your ideas risk turning into delusions. Creativity without contact can start to lose grip with reality. It's a knife's edge. One moment you're channeling pure brilliance, the next you're spiraling into obsessive loops. You write for hours but forget to eat. You build a masterpiece that no one ever sees. You have profound insights that go unspoken because there's no one around to receive them. And then comes the existential crisis. What's the point of creating if no one understands it? That question haunts the lone wolf, because creativity, at its core, is communication, a desire to share something deeply personal with the world. But when the world feels like it doesn't care, or worse, can't understand, you start questioning your own purpose. So what do you do with the gift? You protect it, you nurture it, You give it the solitude it needs to thrive, yes, but you also tether it to reality. You test your ideas. You find even just one person to reflect them back to you. You resist the urge to vanish completely, because if your vision matters, and it does, then part of your responsibility is to give it a path into the world. And let's not ignore this. Your gift comes with suffering. Creativity is not just joy, it's pain, sacrifice, restlessness. It wakes you up at 3 a.m. with ideas you can't ignore. It isolates you, even from people who love you. It makes you weird, and sometimes it makes you hard to love. But it also makes you powerful, and the world needs that power, desperately. So don't run from it, don't silence it, don't water it down to fit in. Own the double-edged nature of your creativity. Let your solitude be the forge, not the grave. The lone wolf isn't just a hermit, it's a visionary, a creator, a conduit for the unspeakable. And when you learn to wield your gift without letting it consume you, you stop being a victim of your isolation and start becoming a master of it. Let's keep going. Here's something nobody tells you when you begin the journey of deep awareness. Clarity has a cost. The more you begin to truly see, the harder it becomes to look away. Once you've peeled back the layers of illusion, you can't unsee what's underneath. And often what's underneath is chaos, contradiction, and raw truth. The lone wolf doesn't just walk alone, they see alone. You see through the social games, you see the lies people tell to keep themselves comfortable. You recognize the masks. Hell, you probably wore them too once until they started to choke you. But now, with your sharpened perception, the world feels like it's made of cardboard cutouts and empty scripts. You see the performance in everyday life. The co-worker faking a smile, the influencer projecting happiness while breaking inside, the parent trying to control their child to avoid confronting their own failures. And worst of all, you see your own performances. The moments you betray your truth just to be palatable. The times you edit your soul so you can be liked. At first, this awareness feels like a superpower. You feel ahead of the curve, awake. You walk through life like you've cracked some kind of invisible code. But slowly, that power becomes a burden, because the more illusions you dissolve, the more alienated you feel. You start realizing how much of life is built on collective denial. Everyone nods and plays along. But you're not playing anymore. You've stepped off the stage, and now you're watching the play from the outside. And it's not just them you see differently. It's everything. Systems, institutions, norms, culture. You notice how most people chase things they don't even want. How they define success by standards they never chose. How suffering is often disguised as ambition, and numbness is sold as peace. This is what I mean by the price of vision. Because vision isn't just about insight, it's about isolation. It's about realizing that the more clearly you see, the less clearly you are seen. People don't understand you. They might admire your mind, even quote your words, but they don't truly grasp the internal reality you navigate daily. And that misunderstanding, it cuts deep. You're not trying to be different. You're not trying to be above anyone. You just are different. Your mind works in layers. Your emotions come in waves. Your truth feels too heavy for casual conversation. So you either carry it alone or you dilute it. Neither option feels good. Sometimes you'll wish you could go back to ignorance, back to being easily amused, back to believing in things just because everyone else did. But once the veil lifts, it doesn't come back down. You may even ask yourself, was it worth it? Was awakening really better than sleep? Because sleep was easier. Sleep had friends. Sleep had comfort. Sleep had simplicity. But let's be honest, you were never meant for sleep. The truth? Vision is painful, but it's pure. It breaks you, but it also builds you into something real. It strips away the false, and what's left is you, unfiltered, uncomfortable, but undeniably authentic. And here's the twist. Vision, when fully embraced, doesn't just isolate, it guides. The very clarity that once made you feel cursed becomes your compass. It helps you recognize the real ones. It draws you toward authenticity, even if it's rare. It pushes you to create, not just to express yourself, but to offer others a glimpse of what you've seen. Because maybe, just maybe, your vision isn't just for you. Maybe you're not here to be understood by everyone. Maybe you're here to remind others of what they've forgotten, to reflect the truths they've buried, to wake people up, not by preaching, but by being. The price of vision is steep. But what it gives you in return? It gives you freedom, not comfort, not ease, but liberation. From illusion, from conformity, from needing to belong to places that could never hold the real you. So if you're seeing too much, feeling too much, knowing too much, don't collapse under it. Stand inside it. Let it burn off everything false. And then speak, create, live. Not to be understood, but to be true. Let's go further. Here's the paradox every lone wolf eventually runs into. You escaped the herd to find freedom. But now the real battle isn't out there. It's in here, inside your own mind, inside the fortress you built to survive. And sometimes, it's a war zone. You thought the challenge was solitude. But solitude is easy compared to the war of self-sabotage, the quiet but constant civil war between the person you are and the one you're afraid to become. That voice in your head, the one that doubts, criticizes, mocks your ambitions. That's your shadow in uniform, disguised as discipline. It wears your face, it uses your voice, and it knows every weak spot you have. The lone wolf doesn't need enemies. The lone wolf is the enemy. You second-guess your instincts. You overanalyze your actions. You start projects and abandon them. You get close to someone, then ghost them out of fear. You plan the future in great detail, then convince yourself it's pointless the next morning. Why? Because no one ever taught you how to trust yourself, not fully. You've spent so much time dodging other people's expectations that now you struggle to differentiate between self-guidance and self-sabotage. Every decision becomes a debate. Every moment of peace feels suspicious. You're constantly scanning for some unseen threat. But here's the brutal truth. No one's holding you back anymore. There's no teacher to rebel against, no boss to blame, no friend to disappoint. There's just you. And your fear of what would happen if you actually lived without apology. Because that's the terrifying part, isn't it? If you stopped doubting, stopped hesitating, if you fully stepped into your potential, you'd have to own the consequences. No more excuses, no more hiding behind perfectionism or overthinking, just raw, exposed action. And if it failed, that failure would be yours, entirely. That's the inner war. The part of you that longs to be seen battling the part of you that would rather disappear than risk rejection. The artist versus the critic. The dreamer versus the doubter. The child who wants to play versus the adult who says, grow up. So how do you fight a war within? You don't. Not forever. You negotiate. You listen. You stop treating parts of yourself like enemies. You stop trying to kill off the voices you don't like and start understanding where they came from. The doubt, it was born from early failure, the inner critic. That's your guardian trying to protect you from pain. The perfectionist, a traumatized optimist who still thinks the only way to be loved is to be flawless. You don't defeat these voices. You lead them. And leadership starts with listening. Ask, what are you afraid of? What are you protecting me from? What would happen if I didn't listen to you for once? Eventually, the battlefield becomes a council room. The internal screaming quiets. The resistance turns into conversation. And that's when real clarity emerges. Not the kind that's born from isolation or intellect, the kind that's born from integration, from unity, from realizing that every part of you, yes, even the messy ones, deserve a seat at the table. Because the real power of the lone wolf isn't just in walking alone, It's in learning how to walk with all the versions of yourself and still move forward. The war within doesn't end with victory. It ends with peace. Let's move on. So the illusions have collapsed. The roles, the scripts, the systems. You've seen through them all. You're no longer seduced by shallow praise, empty ambition, or synthetic success. You've burned through the lies. And what's left? Silence, space, void. This is the part they don't prepare you for. The vacuum left behind once you stop playing by society's rules. No more identity props, no more performance metrics, no more pretending you care about things you don't. It should feel liberating, but it feels terrifying. Because when the noise is gone, all you're left with is the question, now what? This is where the existential desert begins. It's dry, it's vast, it's honest. And it doesn't give you easy answers. It demands that you create your own. Because in this new reality, meaning isn't found, it's forged. Most people never get here. They stay in the loop of social validation, spiritual bypassing, or endless productivity. But you've stepped off the map. You're in the unknown, and the unknown has a brutal kind of beauty. There are no distractions here, just you, your breath, and your brutal awareness that life doesn't come preloaded with purpose. That you, for all your intellect and insight, must now become the architect of your own meaning. And that's the great irony. You thought awakening would give you peace. Instead, it gave you responsibility. You are now both the seeker and the source. But don't let the silence scare you. This space you're in, it's sacred. It's the birthplace of authenticity, the forge of the true self. When everything superficial is stripped away, you finally have the raw material to build something real. Not just a lifestyle, but a life. Not just goals, but a direction. So what gives life meaning? That's not a question I can answer for you. No one can. But here's what I can offer. Meaning doesn't have to be grand. It just has to be real. It often hides in the mundane, in stillness, in service, in struggle. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It's sculpted, slowly, through daily intention. Maybe meaning for you is creating something that outlives you. Maybe it's healing what hurt you. Maybe it's helping one other person make sense of their chaos. Whatever it is, you won't find it on a vision board or in a guru's lecture. You'll find it in the quiet moments, when you stop searching for answers and start listening to the questions. Because the truth is, the question is the path. You're not broken for feeling lost. You're awake. You're not empty. You're in transition. You're not meaningless. You're in the process of choosing what matters. And when you finally begin to fill that void, not with distractions, but with purpose, you'll realize that the existential desert wasn't a punishment. It was an invitation. Let's keep going. Redemption doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it sneaks in quietly, through a breath, a breakdown, a moment of stillness that somehow doesn't shatter you. And that's how it begins, not with applause or validation, but with the gentle realization that you've survived yourself. This part of the journey isn't loud, it's not cinematic, it's subtle, even invisible to the outside world. But for you, it's everything. You spent years trying to belong, then years running from the idea entirely. You rejected systems, communities, expectations. You wore your alienation like armor. You convinced yourself that isolation was purity, that connection was compromise. And maybe for a while it was. But now, something new is stirring. A quiet rebellion, not against society, but against your own extremes. You begin to see that rejecting the world is not the same as transcending it, that disappearing isn't the same as becoming. This is redemption, not in the religious sense, not in the moral sense, but in the existential sense, the redemption of yourself to yourself. A sacred reintroduction, a homecoming. You're not trying to fit in anymore, but you're also not trying to fight everything. You've stopped defining yourself by what you're not. And for the first time you ask, who am I without the resistance? And the answer doesn't roar, it whispers. You're becoming, slowly, painfully, honestly. Not some idealized version of yourself, not the polished mask you used to wear in hopes of acceptance, but the raw, evolving, paradoxical truth of who you are. You laugh more, even at the absurdity of your own mind. You soften, not because you're weak, but because you've finally seen that strength without softness is just armor, and armor gets heavy. You find moments of connection that feel real, even if fleeting. You realize you don't have to be understood by many, just seen by a few. And maybe most importantly, you stop seeing your past as a curse. You begin to see it as material, as compost, as everything you needed to break in order to build. That loneliness, it taught you discernment. That rage, it gave you fire. That despair, it cracked you open so something real could grow. You start forgiving yourself, not in some performative, spiritual bypass kind of way, but truly. You look back and see that every version of you was trying, even the broken ones, especially the broken ones. And in that forgiveness, there's space. Space to be, not to prove, not to perform, just to exist. You don't belong. Not to systems. Not to expectations. Not even to an identity. But you're becoming. Something deeper, something fluid, something true. And that, lone wolf, is your quiet redemption. It doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. It doesn't need to be shared to be sacred. You've walked through the fire. You've spoken with your shadows. You've danced with madness and made art from pain. And now here you are, still walking, still breathing, still becoming, not belonging but becoming. Let's bring it home. If you've made it this far, this isn't just a video anymore. It's a mirror. And you didn't stumble into this by accident. You came here for a reason, even if you can't name it yet. Maybe you're in the thick of it. Maybe you're somewhere between breakdown and breakthrough. Maybe you've burned every bridge. Or maybe you're standing on the last one, debating whether to cross or set it on fire. Wherever you are, this is for you. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're just awake in a world that profits off sleep. You've wandered the labyrinth of your mind, traced every corridor of pain, of doubt, of shadow, and now you're at the threshold. No, this isn't the end, but it is the turning point, the place where survival transforms into creation, where isolation becomes intention. You don't have to disappear to be real. You don't have to suffer to be deep. You don't have to reject everything to stay true to yourself. The lone wolf path doesn't mean walking forever in exile. It means learning how to walk through the world without losing your soul. Maybe you never find a tribe. Maybe you never fully fit in. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is to be a lighthouse in a fogged-up world. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've lived through the questions. Maybe the point is to become someone you can trust, someone your younger self needed, someone who isn't trying to be understood, but to be whole. You've seen too much to go back, but that means you've also seen enough to go forward, with clarity, with courage, with something rare in today's world: integrity. So if you're still here, still breathing, still becoming, walk on, not as a ghost, not as a martyr, but as a conscious, wild, unshakable version of yourself. You may never escape the labyrinth entirely, but you can learn to navigate it. You can leave breadcrumbs. You can light torches. You can reach out, not to be saved, but to remind someone else they're not alone in here. You're not the only one. You never were. But you might be the first to go this far, this deep, and come back with something real. Not a map, a message. This was it. Now go live it. Have you ever noticed that the sharpest minds, the ones who seem to see reality more clearly than others, often prefer being alone? It's not because they hate people. It's not because they lack social skills. The truth is far more unsettling. They've discovered something that most people spend their entire lives running from. They've realized that solitude is not loneliness, it's freedom. What I'm about to share with you isn't a defense of antisocial behavior. It isn't an excuse to cut yourself off from the world. Instead, this is an exploration of why solitude, when chosen deliberately, has been the secret weapon of some of the greatest minds in history. And more importantly, why people who cultivate the ability to be alone often develop a kind of intelligence that feels unsettling to everyone else. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of philosophy's most relentless truth-tellers, understood this better than almost anyone. He deliberately spent much of his life apart from society. Not because he was broken, not because he failed at relationships, but because he saw through the illusions that keep most people chained to crowds, cliques, and constant social performance. And what he discovered in solitude still unsettles people today. Schopenhauer didn't see isolation as an escape. He saw it as the only way to access the full power of independent thought. While most people dilute their intelligence through conformity, compromise, and endless noise, the rare few who dare to walk alone discover something radical, the mind's true potential. That's why Schopenhauer's perspective on solitude is terrifying to many. It forces us to admit that most of our connection isn't genuine connection at all. It's a survival strategy, a constant exchange of validation, conformity, and distraction that prevents real thinking from ever taking root. Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." At first, that sounds like a poetic exaggeration, but the deeper meaning is clear. The moment you need other people to tell you who you are, what to believe, or how to feel, you've surrendered the very thing that makes you human, the capacity to think independently. And that is exactly where we begin. Because if solitude really is a doorway to terrifying intelligence, then the first step is understanding what most people sacrifice the moment they refuse to be alone. Schopenhauer recognized a truth that most people never dare to face. The moment you step into a group, a part of your intelligence begins to die. Even in a simple conversation between two people, your mind is no longer fully your own. A hidden part of it is busy adjusting, softening, monitoring, making sure you say the right things to keep your place in the tribe. Think about how often you've laughed at a joke you didn't find funny. How many times have you agreed with an idea you didn't truly believe, just to avoid friction? How often have you swallowed the strange, dangerous thought that rose in your mind, the thought that might have changed everything, because you sensed it would make you stand out? That is the price of belonging. Schopenhauer called it the will of the masses, and he knew it was a slow form of intellectual suicide. Most people never realize that their opinions, their tastes, even their emotional reactions are not truly theirs. They are borrowed, sculpted by the crowd, fed by the media, molded by the constant pressure to conform. And here's the terrifying part. You don't even notice it happening. Your brain evolved to keep you acceptable. The instant others are present, you become less original, less creative, less willing to follow truth wherever it leads. The group doesn't just influence your thinking, it takes control of it. This is why so few people ever experience the raw power of their own mind. They are never alone with it. From family chatter to workplace politics, from endless social obligations to the digital noise of phones and screens, most people live surrounded, invaded, colonized by the thoughts of others. But the solitary person makes a different calculation. They've decided that the unfiltered voice of their own mind is worth more than constant approval. They've learned that their best ideas do not appear in group brainstorming or casual chatter. They rise only in silence. Watch carefully the next time you see a highly intelligent person in a group. They often seem a little detached. Not because they don't care, but because part of them is quietly observing how the group thinks. how conformity kills originality, how truth gets traded for belonging. They know the cost of inclusion, and they've decided the price is too high. Most people confuse solitude with loneliness. To them, being alone feels like a punishment, a reminder of emptiness. They cannot stand silence because silence forces them to face themselves, and they don't like what they find. But Schopenhauer made a critical distinction. There's a world of difference between the person who is alone because they cannot connect with others, and the person who deliberately chooses solitude because they have built an inner life so rich, so alive, that it outshines the noise of the crowd. This is what he called the art of being alone without being lonely. Think about how most people experience isolation, boredom, anxiety, restlessness. They crave distraction, constant input, entertainment. Why? Because their minds have never been cultivated. Left in silence, they discover there's nothing inside, only echoes of the voices they've consumed. But the intelligent, solitary person has built something different. They've turned inward and discovered an entire universe. Through books, philosophy, art, and reflection, they've created a private world where solitude isn't emptiness, but abundance. Schopenhauer himself described this as the world as representation, the mind's ability to construct meaning, beauty, and depth entirely within itself. To someone who has never developed this inner richness, a solitary person appears almost alien. How can they sit in silence for hours without feeling restless? How can they walk alone for miles and seem content? How can they look so at ease in their own company? The answer is terrifying to those who rely on constant stimulation. Intelligent solitude reveals that human happiness does not require endless social validation. It does not require external entertainment. It does not even require approval from others. Instead, it requires a cultivated mind, the discipline to think deeply, the courage to wrestle with difficult questions, the patience to nurture creative ideas, the capacity to find wonder in the workings of thought itself. This is why solitary people often appear mysterious, even threatening. Their contentment in aloneness destroys the fragile illusion that happiness must come from outside, from other people, from society, from constant distraction. Their very existence is a quiet rebellion against a world terrified of silence. For them, solitude is not a prison, it is home. History gives us striking confirmation of this truth. When the Great Plague shut down Cambridge in 1665, Isaac Newton retreated to his family estate in Woolsthorpe. While others feared isolation, Newton used solitude as fuel. In that single period of quiet, he laid the foundations of calculus, explored the mysteries of light, and even began formulating the law of gravitation. What looked like exile from society became the most productive year of his life. Solitude did not weaken him. It revealed his genius. Schopenhauer believed that true solitude doesn't just protect the mind. It unlocks something far more dangerous: intellectual independence. Most people never think thoughts that are entirely their own. Even their creativity is shaped and filtered by the boundaries of what their peers, families, and cultures consider reasonable or acceptable. Every conversation, every group, every environment carries with it an invisible fence, a set of rules about which ideas can be entertained and which must be rejected without question. But when you are truly alone, those fences disappear. In solitude, the mind can wander into forbidden territory. You can follow strange ideas that would sound absurd if spoken aloud. You can nurture curiosities that have no immediate practical value, that seem like a waste of time to others. And yet, history shows us this is where the greatest breakthroughs are born. Newton's laws of motion were not created in a committee. Einstein's theory of relativity did not emerge from a team-building exercise. Darwin's revolutionary work on evolution grew not from endless debates but from years of private reflection. Schopenhauer's own philosophy, sharp, radical, and uncompromising, was forged in long stretches of deliberate solitude. Nietzsche understood this well. He often retreated into the Swiss Alps, walking alone for hours in silence. He wrote that all truly profound thoughts are conceived while walking. Free from the pressure of groups, he let his mind wander into territory others would dismiss as madness. Out of this solitude came ideas that redefined philosophy, the will to power, the death of God, eternal recurrence. Ideas that could never have survived the suffocating consensus of a crowd. These thinkers were not antisocial. They weren't avoiding people because of fear. They were protecting the conditions that allowed them to think thoughts that had never been thought before. They understood that the most valuable contribution they could offer humanity wasn't conformity, it was originality. But here's the cost. Intellectual independence is lonely. When you follow a path that no one else sees, you walk without approval. No one reassures you that you're right. No one confirms you're on the right track. In fact, the world often ridicules, dismisses, or even condemns the person who refuses to think like everyone else. This is why solitude requires courage. To sit with your own untested ideas, to live with the possibility that they are either nonsense or genius, takes more strength than most people will ever possess. And yet, it is precisely in this space of uncertainty that true breakthroughs are born. The solitary individual is willing to pay the price of isolation because they know the alternative is worse. A life spent recycling the same thoughts as everyone else, never touching the edges of what the mind is truly capable of. Schopenhauer understood something that modern psychology is only now beginning to confirm. The mind's energy is limited. Every thought, every conversation, every interaction drains from the same pool of attention. And once that energy is spent, it cannot be reclaimed. Most people waste this energy without realizing it. They scatter their focus across trivial conversations, endless digital distractions, shallow relationships, and obligations that bring no real value. They treat attention as if it were infinite, but it isn't. It is the most precious currency of the mind. This is why intelligent people often choose solitude. They know that social interaction, no matter how pleasant, comes at a hidden cost. Every gathering requires energy to decode unspoken agendas, to navigate group dynamics, to manage impressions, to anticipate emotional reactions. On the surface, it looks like harmless small talk. In reality, it is an enormous drain on mental resources. The solitary person has done the calculation and decided the price is too high. They would rather spend their attention on thinking, creating, studying, and building than on maintaining endless circles of shallow connection. This doesn't mean they cut themselves off completely. In fact, the few relationships they do keep are often deep, rare, and enduring. But what they refuse is the constant leakage of mental energy that comes from superficial interactions. For them, focus is sacred, and solitude is the shield that protects it. Schopenhauer lived this truth ruthlessly. He walked alone. He dined alone. He structured his life not around other people's demands, but around the preservation of his own mental power. To outsiders, it looked strange, even antisocial, but the results spoke for themselves, a body of work so sharp and enduring that it still unsettles the modern world. The lesson is clear. To protect your mind, you must protect your attention. And solitude is the most powerful way to do it. Most people will never understand this. They will spend their lives pouring their mental energy into gossip, entertainment, and the exhausting performance of belonging. But the solitary individual knows that the mind's true potential can only be realized when its energy is guarded, concentrated, and directed towards something greater than distraction. One of the most unsettling gifts of solitude is vision. When you step outside the constant chatter of social life, you begin to see it for what it really is, a cycle of repetitive games, illusions, and performances. Schopenhauer called this philosophical vision, the capacity to observe human behavior without being trapped inside it. To most people, the dramas of daily life feel urgent and significant. Who said what? who gained status, who offended whom. But to the solitary observer, these dramas shrink into patterns. You notice how the same conflicts repeat endlessly across families, workplaces, and societies. You begin to see the machinery of fear, desire, and ego that drives people more than reason ever does. This clarity can be liberating, but it also comes with a cost. Because once you see the patterns, it becomes difficult to participate in them unconsciously. The rituals of status seeking, the endless pursuit of approval, the small lies people tell to survive in groups. These lose their power over you, but they also lose their charm. The solitary thinker often finds themselves alienated not by choice, but by perception. They cannot pretend that the rituals matter as much as everyone insists they do. They see through the illusion, and that makes ordinary life feel strangely hollow. This is why intelligent loners can appear detached, even cold. But it isn't contempt, it's clarity. They've traded the comfort of belonging for the honesty of independent vision. They still interact with society, but they do so consciously, as observers and occasional participants, rather than as people who depend on the crowd for meaning. Schopenhauer warned that this kind of vision is both a gift and a burden. To see clearly is to recognize the suffering and illusions that most people need in order to function. It's why so many retreat into distraction rather than face the raw truth of existence. But the solitary person accepts this burden. They understand that wisdom is not free. It costs comfort, it costs belonging, it costs innocence. And yet this clarity gives them something far more valuable: authenticity. They no longer live on borrowed beliefs or borrowed priorities. They live from the ground of their own perception. Schopenhauer's most profound insight about solitude was this: people who choose to be alone are not rejecting humanity. They are preparing to serve it in a way that most will never understand. Carl Jung had a similar revelation in his later years. He built a retreat by Lake Zurich, a stone tower where he lived and worked in near isolation. There he recorded what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, diving into dreams, myths, and archetypes. Jung understood that solitude was not an escape, but a descent, a journey inward where the deepest truths of the psyche reveal themselves. Without that solitude, his psychology would never have taken shape. To the outside world, the solitary thinker looks withdrawn, even selfish. But beneath the silence, something is being forged. Creativity, wisdom, original thought, deep understanding. All of these require conditions that ordinary social life rarely provides. In solitude, the mind stretches into places it cannot reach while entangled in the noise of the crowd. Solitude is not escape, it is preparation. The great paradox is that the people who seem most distant from society often end up giving it the most. Think of the scientists, philosophers, artists, and visionaries who spent years in relative isolation only to return with discoveries and creations that reshaped human life. They weren't hiding from humanity. They were cultivating something to bring back to it. This is why Schopenhauer found the intelligence of solitary people so terrifying. They threaten the foundation of a social system built on conformity and constant validation. They've discovered that meaning, identity, and purpose can be drawn from within, not borrowed from the crowd. That makes them untouchable, independent, free. And freedom in a world addicted to belonging is always frightening. The solitary person is not antisocial. They are not damaged, broken, or afraid. They have simply seen that the highest possibilities of the human mind demand silence. They demand courage. They demand the willingness to be alone long enough to hear one's own thoughts fully, without interruption. That is why these individuals often seem mysterious to us. When you meet someone who is truly at peace in their own company, who can sit in silence without restlessness, who finds richness in the depths of their own inner world, you are not just seeing a loner. You are seeing someone who has cultivated a form of intelligence that emerges only in solitude. And this is what makes them terrifyingly intelligent. not just their capacity to think, but their willingness to do so in defiance of everything society demands. They walk away from the crowd not because they despise it, but because they know the crowd cannot give them what they need. The next time you encounter someone who seems strangely content being alone, remember Schopenhauer's warning. You may be in the presence of someone who has unlocked a form of intelligence that others can barely imagine. An intelligence born in silence, sharpened in solitude, and carried back into the world as a gift. They are not running away from life, they are running toward truth.